All right, Jay. Moving on to a different sporting code. We're speaking cricket now. The IPL is about to start right now in March, I think, a couple of weeks' time. But so is a Bangladesh tour to South Africa. So obviously there are a couple of Proteas players who are eligible to play in the IPL. Obviously, depending on who gets bid for, where they end up and which teams. But I think because South Africa has been playing quite decently, there is a few number of them that could go into the IPL. The question is though, because we've been on a good run, we just beat India in the Test tour, and we pulled the Test series out of the fire in terms of against New Zealand. We've basically got our mojo back. Do you think the IPL could be a hindrance to the Proteas should some of the players go? So the question is, should they even go? Or should they just say, now we're going to represent our country, we're fine, and forgo all that money?
So cricketers have said that they're leaving it up to the players to make the choice. The choice that is on the table, Kagiso Rabada is paid by CSA. His contract is for 3 million a year, roundabout. His contract for Kings 11 Punjab is 18 million. Now,
and
Chuck,
2 months or so.
Yeah, 99.9% of the time, right? You know, I'm someone who says, forgo,
get your money, man.
Forgo whatever loyalties you have to your country. Patriotism is for soldiers. What we see in Europe, that's where your patriotic streak needs to shine through. But in terms of there's a bag that you need to go secure, it's 18 million versus 3 million. I would always go with the IPL, except for the fact that when you look at how they cross over, so they're going to be available for the ODIs and the limited overs, ODIs and T20s, I believe. The question is the test matches, because if they play the first test and then go after the first test, then they would have missed around 3 games. So if they can find a happy medium there where they can leave after the first test, then you're only missing 3 games. But then if they stay for the second test, that's almost half of the group stage games that they would be missing. And obviously you don't get the full amount if you miss the games. You get a pro rata amount, but then the contract is for 3 years, you know. And as I'm saying, this is the 0.01% of the time where I'd say you can do both. But the issue though is, do you want to leave halfway through a test match? What happens if the Proteas do lose the first test against Bangladesh? Don't think it would happen, but Bangladesh did beat New Zealand before New Zealand came back on them. So it's possible. But also, there is, when you mention the momentum that we're building, you do want to get these wins under your belt. You know, when the question, when Dean Elgar is speaking about this whole situation, Dean Elgar said that this is going to prove players' loyalties. And I'm like, I understand why Dean is saying that, because he's the captain of the Proteas, but Dean also is not in the IPL. So his loyalties are very much biased towards the Proteas. He doesn't have a choice to make. And he also says that he's going to go around to his teammates and he's going to say to them that we've already been playing not that many test matches. And the reason these schedules are clashing in this way is because of the last couple of years, and nations are trying to make up the matches which have been lost. And Dean Elgar wants to make it clear to his teammates that, well, we have missed out on a lot of test cricket, so you need to stay. And he's also going to be using manipulative language to say that it's about patriotism and you need to choose loyalty. I do think I think, man, even if they miss half of this particular one, where if this was like every single year and you miss out on 18 million a year, that's different too. You can get 9 million this year, you know, and you'll get your 8 million, 18 million going forward.
A little caveat in that T20 World Cup has come up this year. Do you not think the best of our players needs to test themselves against the best in the IPL? Or do you think they need to stay as a unit, gel, work together as a unit, and then compete? What do you think stands us in better stead? Going to the IPL and getting battle tested, or trying to build some form of identity and cohesion? Because, I mean, the last couple of World Cups, weren't really optimistic. We did well in the last World Cup, but we weren't really expecting much. But with that upcoming World Cup, do you think it'd be wise to go or stay?
You'd think the more rigorous competition, which would be the IPL, with all due respect, versus T20s against, and test matches for that matter, against Bangladesh, but 2 different formats to begin with. I do think then there's a reverence that needs to be paid to the test side. So if they stay, it's not a matter of then up against the T20. But it is important. The T20 World Cup is important. It's the World Cup that is happening this year. We haven't won a World Cup of any of any kind. Not the 50 over format, not the 20. And we played well, as you say, in the last T20 World Cup. Unfortunately, in the end, that net run rate came back to bite us. We beat Australia. We might have even been in a chance to win the whole thing because Australia won that T20 World Cup, you know. So it's a bit of a difficult one. I don't think, though, the disparity in quality of competition that you're going to get is so high that definitely gonna win if our players play the IPL, because everyone else is playing the IPL as well, you know. So yeah, I'm still in that middle ground where you can make it work, whether they leave after the first test, and even if you think that it's not best for them to leave at all, but to leave after the whole tour is done against Bangladesh, and they join the IPL midway through. Because even if they join the IPL midway through, they still are going to be facing that competition anyway.
Look, I think it's a valid point that you raise in terms of the paychecks. That is a tricky subject, because how do you dictate to someone that takes
that's
less money?
6 years worth of what you're getting from the Proteas in like 1 year.
Yeah, but also you have to look at it from Dean Elgar's side in terms of historically, we've done very well in terms of Test cricket. We've done well in terms of what we do during the season. But when it comes to World Cup, the actual tournament, in World Cup, yes, we perform well. But the tournament itself, whether it's T20, whether it's ODIs, we don't do so well. Now that the test arena has actually been made into a test championship, and there's something to be got at the end of the year, there's something to work towards.
That counts.
And yeah, that counts. It's not just a game that we're playing and we'll be number one and have the mace, but it's an actual championship that every year we're being graded, or rather every season. So maybe looking at what we can do and how we beat India and how we fared against New Zealand, maybe that's something that we can actually realistically go for, and we have a very good chance of actually attaining it. So I see his battle cry, but on the flip side, man, it's sport. It's a short career, number one. If you can bag that money right now, as opposed to wait for 6 years under Protea
like
colours.
In the case of the bowlers, you're bowling like 4 overs at a time, versus you're slogging away in the afternoons under the hot baking sun and bowling with 20 overs. In terms of the return on investment, or the rate of return, like it's so much weighted towards the IPL. But as much as I would choose the career and why I got into the sport versus patriotism, I think there is a place as well to consider the fact that you are part of this team. That is your team, you know, regardless of the emblem. Yes, the emblem is the South African flag, the South African Proteas, but that is your team, those are your teammates, and you have some loyalties to them, and you have a duty to complete something that you started together. Because if you go by the words of Dean Elgar, you get a sense that they have bought into something as a collective, and if that is the case, then keep your word, you know, because that is even more important than, because if you just like, this is what I'm going to do, and then after finding out how much you're gonna get after being caught on the auction market, then you're like, nah, ma, then that's you're a little weasel.
I mean, that was leveled against AB, that he was not committed to the Proteas, but he was available for everything else. It's like, well, you're still playing, you're still fairly busy in the year, and you're away from your family, so we don't quite get it. But here's what I'd say, Jay. I think if you are in the auction and your name gets taken up and someone wants you to play for their franchise in the IPL, I'd say, with all due respect to Bangladesh, go. I think this is the chance to blood in new talent.
That's the guys,
the guys who've had a few games, because you're playing now in home conditions, and you're going to get a crack against Bangladesh, which I think is the fairest. And
it's Bangladesh.
We want to say that.
I say no disrespect, but it is Bangladesh. You know what I mean? If there's any teams like Bangladesh or Zimbabwe, or maybe even West Indies, you know?
Basically.
So
now,
that's where you want to take the chances.
Now is the time to blood in that new talent. So come next year when you're chasing that Test championship, when you're going to other World Cups, you've had your eye on different talent, because I think that's the thing that hit us last World Cup, that we were focused on the Faf and the ABs and the Morkles and the Stains, and as soon as they left, we were like, okay, where to?
We're scrambling now.
Yeah, so I think if you use these opportunities and allow the boys to make money as well, because I think that's how you build also a team. That Donna, we allowed you to go last season. This season, please stay. If you come with that bargaining chip, I think that is fair. But at the same time, I think you can't really mess with people's money, man. If people want their money, allow them to.
Yeah, man.
On to someone who...
A more melancholic note.
Yeah, and more, it depends from which angle. Because if you were on social media and you saw how some people were enjoying their money, then you were seeing this differently. But This week, Jay, this past week, we lost Shane Warne. It was sudden. It was out of the blue. But like I said, if you're on social media, you have a different narrative. But nonetheless, Jay, the cricketing world has lost a giant, an icon. Arguably, many would say the best spinner to ever pick up the ball. I mean, one time Molilliran might want to disagree with that, but Anil Kumble might want to disagree with that. But
not Kumble. Just Molilliran. The only other person in that conversation is Molilliran.
In terms of number of wickets, yeah, because even surpassed Shane Warne's record.
Even in terms of skill. Yes, Kumble took a lot of wickets, and he was also a leg spinner, but he was not in the class of Shane Warne.
Okay, fair point. Shane Warne is gone. What is the cricket world missing? How big a character, how big a talent was he in his pomp?
So, when, as South Africans, what we know Shane Warne to be is our tormentor, and chief tormentor of Daryl Cullinan, who was his bunny. You know, and in those early days when I was watching cricket, I knew Gary Kirsten and Daryl Cullinan with that 275 sharing that all-time record for South Africa. Those were two linchpins. This is before Cullis came into his own. And whenever one came on to bowl against Cullinan, it was a foregone conclusion that this is what's going to happen. In the greater sense of the cricketing world, or when you listen to the sports aficionados, when you listen to some of the players who played with and against Warne, the guys who came before him, and also then when you look back and in history, when Warne comes into the game in the early 90s, this is following a period where in the 70s Australia had Lillian Thompson, where when you then look at the West Indies, who did not lose a series but won between 1976 and 1990 Test series, that is, and they were blasting teams away with a four-pronged pace attack. You know, the Michael Holdings of this world, Joel Garners and the like. So, and everyone wanted to be a fast bowler because that was the name of the game. It was pace. Whereas leg spin was thought to be a dying art because it is very difficult to master leg spin. This is why you see so many more off spinners than you do leg spinners. It's not to say that off spin is easy, but relative to wrist spin or leg spin, it is easier to master. You can pick up a ball and you can go try spin it, right? And you can do this action with your wrist. But if you actually try like bowl it and have even the variety that Shane showed, it's very difficult. And Shane Warne comes into the game. Initially in that first game against India, he's smacked all over the place by the commentator turned coach. Just forgot, Ravi Shastri. But then going forward, you have the ball of the century against Gatting, and throughout the 90s, up to the point in the year 2000, where he'd played only about eight years, Wisden name him as one of the 5 greatest players of the century. This is firmly in the middle of his career. This is before he comes back to England in 2005 in that all-time epic test like in the Ashes where England won 2-1, and he bags 40 wickets. I remember when watching that, like, I couldn't help but get back to Shane Warne. Like, he's got 40 wickets in this 5-game series, and even with the bat, he is fighting the whole way through. Even when they lose the series, you've got that iconic picture where he walks up to the deserter, Kevin Peterson, and he shakes his hand, and the sportsmanship where you could understand that everyone is down based on what just transpired with Australia having not lost against England in the longest time. They were dominating them, and he was that larger than life character, and more than anything, just his skill with the ball was out of this world.
I think that's a very great ode to the man. He's a guy who firmly lived his life. I'll tell you that much. I mean, spiky hair. You could tell he was a personality on the
dancing
pitch.
with the wicket and these things. And when you watch that video, you can see how they cut away from him very quickly. And you think the broadcasters, especially Australia, they weren't all that keen on the personality, but he was who he was.
Yeah, and I mean, post his career, did good work with the punditry, with the commentary as well. I think he was very good all round for the game, and I think it's a big loss because he had a lot more to offer. I mean, because of what spin bowling is, even later on in his career when he was playing the last of his years in the IPL, the last of his years for Australia, he was still a threat because you don't have to run in, you don't have to use so much physical exertion to get the ball through. It's just more with the skill. I mean, Shane Warne was so good that he carried that body into cricket his whole career, and it never hindered him. It's only now towards the end of his retirement where he toned down and slimmed up and all that stuff. But his skill did more than whatever his body did not want to do. And I think that's the ode to the man who, in the middle of his career, as you say, was voted one of the best in the century. So
till the very end, because at that point, I believe he had around 300 and something wickets. And he ended his career with 708. So there was another 400 wickets to come, and already he was thought to be, because of those 5 Wisden cricketers, 4 of them are batsmen. He's the only bowler in the top 5. He was thought to be the greatest bowler of all time by that respected almanac at that point in his career. And then he goes on, as I'm saying, there's the question of might he retire in the early 2000s, might he retire, might he not, because there was also the matter of he wanted the Australian captaincy. And when it passed from Steve Waugh to Ricky Ponting, he may have felt overlooked and might want to step back from the team. But then he continues. As I'm saying, he has a great series. 2001 Ashes, 2005 Ashes as well. And in that year, I believe or one of those years, 5, 6 or 7, 2005, 6 or 7, he takes about 96 wickets. And this is towards the tail end of his career. I think also one of the standout performances for me, it's easy to forget because when you think back to that cricket World Cup semi-final against the Proteas, you always think the run that should not have happened, that should have happened, that didn't happen, Alan Donald getting mixed up with Lance Klusener. But when you look back at that match, South Africa were 48 for no loss. 12 overs having gone, chasing 213, I believe. Well on our way to winning that World Cup semi. And then Shane Warne comes on to bowl. First over, he gets Gibbs. And he gets 4 for 29, I believe, in that match. And he's the man of the match. He's the biggest reason, outside of that play at the end of the match. He's the greatest reason why Australia go to the final and win that World Cup and start the momentum where no one could beat them for the next 8 years in one day international. So yeah, man, one of the all-time greats.
And yeah, that's it. That's a chapter in his career, and that's his life as well. But we say thank you for what he gave to the game of cricket. It was good to watch. It was good to witness that talent in that era as well.
It really was. Guys, thank you for joining us on this episode of Two Up Front. Please do like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Do follow us on social media. You can find us at Two Up Front Pod. You can find us there on Twitter and on Instagram. You can find me at J_Mzulu. You can find Chuck at Chuck2up from J. I'm outie.
Alright guys, hit us up on those platforms. Let us know what you make of the Soweto Derby and Chiefs taking that game. Let us know what you made of the Manchester Derby as well, Man United's performance or lack thereof, or would you say that is an ode to
and send a word of comfort to Chuck.
I don't need that. And then lastly, 4th place in the EPL, is that Arsenal's spot to lose, or do you think there are more takers for that place? This is Chuck and I'm out.